Hello, and welcome back to Speak English Daily.
Hi everyone, we are very happy to see you here today.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Speak English Daily, the place where you can relax, listen to real conversations, and slowly become more confident with English. I'm Anna, and it's really nice to have you here again. Maybe you're listening while taking a walk. Maybe you're studying for a few minutes before work. Or maybe you just wanted some quiet time to practice English today. However you are listening, I'm glad you are here. Today we're going to talk about something very common in modern life. Many people experience it, but they don't always notice it happening. The topic is comparing yourself to other people. It can happen very quickly. You see someone doing something well, and suddenly your mind starts thinking about your own progress.
Yes, that's true. I think almost everyone has experienced this feeling at some point. You see someone speaking English very confidently, and you start thinking about your own English. Maybe you think their vocabulary is better, or they speak more smoothly, and then you begin judging your own ability.
That's a great example, and it doesn't only happen with language learning. People compare many things in life. They compare their careers, their money, their achievements, and even their daily lifestyles. Sometimes we don't even realize we are doing it. Our mind just starts measuring things automatically.
And the problem is that when we compare ourselves to others, we often see only the result, not the journey. For example, if someone speaks excellent English, we might assume they learned quickly. But in reality, they may have spent many years practicing, making mistakes, and slowly improving.
That's an important point. When we see someone's success, we usually see the final picture, not the work behind it. Every skill takes time to build. Learning a language is a long process, and every learner moves at a different speed.
I've also noticed that many English learners feel pressure when they compare themselves with friends or classmates. For example, someone might say, "My friend started learning English at the same time as me, but now their English is much better." When people think like this, it can make them feel discouraged.
Yes, and feeling discouraged can make learning more difficult. When someone believes they are not good enough, they may stop practicing or become afraid to speak. But the truth is that progress does not look the same for everyone.
Some people improve quickly in speaking. Others become stronger in listening or reading first.
That's why it's helpful to focus on your own progress instead of someone else's progress. If your English today is better than it was a few months ago, that means you are moving forward. Even small improvements are important. And if you are learning English, remember that it is completely normal not to understand everything in a conversation. In real life, people often ask for clarification. For example, you can say, "Sorry, could you repeat that?" Or, "I didn't catch that. Can you say it again?" These simple phrases help you stay in the conversation and keep learning.
Exactly. Learning a language is not about being perfect. It's about continuing to practice and becoming more comfortable step by step. And when people stop comparing themselves so much, they often enjoy the learning process more. So today we're going to explore this topic together and talk about why comparison happens and how we can start thinking about progress in a healthier way.
When we talk about comparing ourselves to others, it's helpful to ask a simple question first. Why do people do this so often? Why does our mind immediately look at another person and start measuring our own progress? In many ways, comparison is a very old habit. Humans have always looked at other people to understand where they stand in a group. It helped people understand their role in a community, their skills, and sometimes even their safety. But in modern life, this habit can sometimes work against us.
That's true. Our brain is trying to understand our position, but today we are surrounded by information about other people all the time. In the past, you mostly compared yourself with people around you, maybe classmates, coworkers, or neighbors. But now, because of the internet and social media, we see thousands of people every day. We see their achievements, their travels, their skills, and their lifestyles.
And the difficult part is that we usually see only the best moments of those people. Someone posts a photo from a beautiful vacation. Someone shares a message about a new job. Someone uploads a video speaking English very confidently. When we see these moments again and again, it can create the feeling that everyone else is moving forward very quickly.
Yes, and when that happens, our mind sometimes forgets something important. Every person chooses what they share with others. Most people do not share their difficult moments. They don't show the times when they struggled to learn something, when they felt confused, or when they made many mistakes.
That's especially true with language learning. If you watch a short video of someone speaking perfect English, you are seeing a finished moment. You don't see the years of practice behind that moment. You don't see the times that person forgot words, made grammar mistakes, or felt nervous speaking.
Exactly. Many people who speak English today remember a time when they felt shy or unsure. They might have needed extra time to think about a sentence. They might have asked people to repeat things many times. These experiences are normal part of learning.
Sometimes learners also compare themselves with people who have different learning environments. For example, someone might live in a country where English is spoken every day. They hear English at work, in shops, and on television. Another learner might live in a place where English is used much less. Their main practice might come from books, podcasts, or online lessons.
That difference can make a big impact. If you hear a language every day in real conversations, your listening skills usually grow faster. But if your exposure to the language is limited, your progress might feel slower, even if you're working very hard.
And this is why comparison can sometimes create unnecessary pressure. Instead of noticing your own progress, you start focusing only on the distance between your level and someone else's level.
A healthier way to think about learning is to focus on your personal improvement. For example, maybe 3 months ago you felt nervous speaking even one sentence in English. Today, you can explain a simple idea or ask a question in a conversation. That is real progress.
And if you ever feel unsure during a conversation, there are simple phrases that can help. For example, you might say, "Give me a moment to think," or "I'm looking for the right word." These phrases are very natural, and they give you a little time to organize your thoughts.
Yes, and people in real conversations understand that. Communication is not about speaking perfectly every second. It's about sharing ideas and understanding each other. When we remember that everyone is learning and improving in their own way, it becomes easier to relax and keep moving forward.
Earlier, we talked about why people compare themselves to others. It often happens without thinking. Our mind simply notices what other people are doing and starts measuring our own progress. But sometimes the feeling becomes stronger when it connects to personal experiences. Many learners remember a moment when they suddenly felt behind or less confident because of someone else's success.
I remember a situation like that from my own life. When I was younger, I started learning a new language with a friend. We were both beginners, and at the beginning, our levels were almost the same. We practiced together, studied vocabulary, and sometimes helped each other understand grammar. But after some time, I noticed something interesting. My friend started improving very quickly, especially in speaking. During conversations, he answered questions faster than I did. He remembered more vocabulary and his sentences sounded more natural. And when I saw that, I started comparing my progress with his progress.
And how did that make you feel at that time?
At first, I felt a little discouraged. I remember thinking, why is he improving faster than me? I was studying, I was practicing, but it still seemed like he was moving ahead more quickly. And when you think like that, your mind can start creating negative ideas. For example, I began wondering if I was simply not good at languages. I thought maybe he had a special talent and I didn't. When people start thinking this way, learning can feel heavier and less enjoyable.
I think many listeners can recognize that feeling. It's easy to assume that someone else is naturally better or more talented, but usually there is more happening behind the scenes.
Yes, and later I discovered something important. My friend had more opportunities to practice speaking outside our lessons. He worked with people who spoke that language every day. So while I practiced mostly during study time, he was using the language in real conversations much more often. That extra practice made a big difference. It didn't mean he was more talented. It simply meant he had more exposure to the language in daily life.
That's a really useful example because it shows how different environments can influence learning. Sometimes when we compare ourselves to someone else, we don't realize that their situation may be very different from ours.
Exactly. And once I understood that, my thinking started to change. Instead of comparing myself with him, I began focusing on what I could do to improve my own learning process. I started listening to more audio, speaking more often, and looking for small opportunities to practice.
And did that change your motivation?
Yes, it did. When I stopped focusing on someone else's progress, learning felt lighter again. I started paying attention to my own improvements. Maybe they were small at first, but they were still progress.
That's a great reminder for anyone learning English right now. Your journey will never look exactly like someone else's journey. The important thing is to notice your own steps forward, even if they seem small. And during conversations, it's perfectly normal to pause when you need time to think. If you're searching for a word, you can say something simple like, "Let me think for a second," or "How do I say this?" These phrases are very common and they help you stay engaged in the conversation.
Yes, and most people appreciate the effort you're making to communicate. They understand that learning a language takes time. When learners stop comparing themselves so much and focus on their own growth, they often discover that progress becomes much more enjoyable.
When comparison becomes a habit, it doesn't only affect how we see our skills, it can also affect how we feel emotionally. Many people start to experience pressure, frustration, or even self-doubt. Instead of enjoying the process of learning something new, they begin worrying about whether they are good enough.
Yes, and that pressure can quietly grow over time. For example, a learner might watch someone speaking fluent English and immediately think, "I will never reach that level." When that thought appears again and again, it can slowly reduce confidence.
Confidence is very important when learning a language. If someone believes they can improve, they are more willing to try speaking, ask questions, and make mistakes. But if someone feels constantly behind others, they may become silent. They might avoid speaking because they are afraid of making errors.
I've seen that happen in many classrooms and conversation groups. Sometimes a learner understands a lot, but they stay quiet because they think their English is not good enough. In reality, speaking more would actually help them improve faster.
That's a great point. Mistakes are not a sign of failure. They are a natural part of learning. Every fluent speaker you meet today made thousands of mistakes while they were learning. The difference is that they continued practicing.
Another emotional effect of comparison is the feeling of always being behind. Someone might look at other people and think they started too late. For example, a learner might say, "I should have started learning English years ago." When people think this way, they focus on the past instead of the opportunities they have now.
And focusing on the past usually doesn't help us grow. The only moment where learning can happen is the present moment. Every conversation you listen to, every sentence you try to speak, and every new word you learn adds something to your progress.
Exactly. Even 10 minutes of listening practice each day can slowly build your understanding. Many learners underestimate the power of small, consistent practice.
Another thing that can help learners is remembering that communication is not only about perfect grammar. Communication is about sharing ideas. Even simple sentences can express clear thoughts. For example, if you want to explain that you are still learning English, you might say, "I'm still learning, so please speak a little slowly." Or you might say, "My English is improving, but I sometimes need a moment to think." These phrases help create understanding in conversations.
And most people respond very positively when they hear that. They become more patient and supportive because they see that you're making an effort to communicate. When learners begin to accept mistakes as part of the process, something important changes. Instead of feeling embarrassed, they start seeing mistakes as useful feedback. And when that happens, comparison loses much of its power because the focus moves back to personal growth and steady improvement.
When we realize that comparison is affecting our confidence, the next step is learning how to change our perspective. This doesn't mean comparison will disappear immediately. Our minds are used to doing it. But with a little awareness, we can slowly shift the way we think.
One helpful idea is remembering that every person is on a different timeline. Life does not move in the same order for everyone. Some people discover new skills early, others find them later. The same thing happens with language learning. Some learners start as children, while others begin as adults.
And starting later does not mean the result will be worse. Adults often bring different strengths to learning. They may have stronger discipline, clearer goals, and more patience with long-term progress.
Another important shift in thinking is changing the question we ask ourselves. Instead of asking, "Am I better than that person?" we can ask, "What small step can I take today to improve?" This question moves the focus from comparison to action.
Yes, and those small steps can be very simple. For example, listening to an English podcast for 15 minutes, learning 5 new words, or practicing one short conversation. These actions may seem small in the moment, but they create progress over time.
I also like to remind learners that progress is often invisible at the beginning. You may not notice improvement every single day, but after several weeks or months, you suddenly realize that understanding has become easier.
That happens to many language learners. At first, listening feels difficult because everything sounds fast. But after regular practice, your brain begins recognizing patterns. Words become more familiar, and conversations start to feel clearer.
A useful way to notice your progress is to remember where you started. Think about the first time you tried listening to English conversations. Maybe it felt confusing or overwhelming. Now, after some practice, you are able to follow much more.
That reflection can be very encouraging. Instead of comparing your level with someone else's level, you compare your present ability with your past ability. And during conversations, you don't need to rush your words. If you need a moment to think, you can say something like, "Let me think about how to say that," or "I'm trying to find the right word." These phrases are very natural, and they give you time to organize your thoughts.
Yes, and those small pauses are completely normal in real conversations. Even native speakers pause when they are thinking. Another helpful habit is celebrating small wins. Maybe today you understood a new expression. Maybe you spoke a longer sentence than before. These small moments show that learning is happening. When people begin to notice these improvements, their attention slowly moves away from comparison and toward appreciation of their own progress.
So far, we've talked about why comparison happens and how it can affect confidence. Now let's look at something practical. What can someone actually do when they notice themselves comparing their progress with others? Changing a habit starts with small actions.
One helpful step is becoming aware of the moment comparison begins. Sometimes the thought appears very quickly. For example, you might hear someone speaking fluent English and immediately think, "My English is not as good." When you notice that thought, you can gently remind yourself that everyone's learning journey is different.
Awareness is powerful because it creates a small pause between the thought and your reaction. Instead of believing the thought immediately, you can question it. You might ask yourself, "Do I really know this person's full learning journey?" Most of the time, the answer is no.
Another practical step is focusing on consistent practice rather than perfect results. Learning a language grows through repetition. Listening regularly, reading simple texts, and speaking whenever possible slowly build confidence.
Many learners also benefit from creating a small daily routine. It doesn't need to be long or complicated. For example, you might listen to English for 10 or 15 minutes each day, review a few vocabulary words, or practice speaking with a friend.
Those small routines create momentum. When something becomes part of your daily life, progress starts to feel more natural.
It can also help to limit how much you compare yourself to people online. Social media often shows polished moments, but it rarely shows the practice behind those moments. Reducing that exposure can make your learning experience feel calmer.
Another idea is to measure progress in personal ways. Instead of asking, "Am I better than someone else?" you might ask, "Can I understand this conversation better than last month?" Or, "Can I explain my idea more clearly than before?"
And when you are speaking with someone and you feel unsure, simple communication phrases can help. For example, you might say, "Could you speak a little slower?" Or, "I understand the idea, but I need a moment to answer." These phrases are very normal in conversations.
Yes, communication is not about being perfect. It's about connecting with another person and sharing ideas. When learners accept that communication can include pauses and small mistakes, speaking becomes much less stressful. Over time, these small habits begin to change the way people see their learning. Instead of constantly measuring themselves against others, they begin noticing their own growth and effort. And that shift in attention often makes the entire learning process feel more positive and encouraging.
As we come toward the end of today's conversation, it's helpful to reflect on the main idea we explored together. Comparing ourselves to others is something many people experience. It can happen quickly and sometimes without us even noticing it. We see someone doing something well, and our mind immediately starts measuring our own progress.
Yes, and while comparison may feel natural, it doesn't always give us a clear picture. Most of the time, we are seeing only a small part of another person's story. We see their results, but we don't see the long process that helped them reach that point.
That's why it can be more helpful to focus on our own path. Learning a language is a personal journey. Some learners move quickly in speaking, while others become strong in listening or reading first. Progress can appear in different ways and at different speeds.
And small improvements really matter. Every new word you understand, every sentence you try to speak, and every conversation you listen to adds something to your learning. Even when progress feels slow, those small steps are building your skills.
Another important idea we discussed is confidence. When learners stop comparing themselves so often, they usually feel more relaxed during conversations. They become more willing to speak, ask questions, and express their ideas. And remember, you don't need perfect English to communicate. Clear, simple sentences are often enough to share your thoughts. If you need more time to think, you can say, "Give me a moment to think," or "I'm trying to find the right word." These phrases are very normal in everyday conversations.
Yes, even fluent speakers pause while thinking. Communication is not about speaking without pauses, it's about understanding each other. One helpful habit is looking back at your own progress from time to time. Think about what you could do 6 months ago and compare it with what you can do today. Many learners are surprised when they notice how much they have improved.
When you look at learning this way, the experience becomes much more encouraging. Instead of feeling like you are competing with others, you begin to see yourself growing step by step. And that growth doesn't need to be fast to be meaningful. Consistent effort, even in small amounts, can create real change over time.
So if you ever catch yourself comparing your English to someone else's, try to pause and remind yourself that every learner has a unique journey. Your progress is yours, and it deserves patience and appreciation. Keep practicing, Keep listening and keep giving yourself the space to improve little by little.